we think it's going to be an amazing site for this project. Overall floor plan, we've got parking in the front, parking on the side for employees. There's two main entrances. There's an adoption entrance and an impound entrance. And to the left of the impound entrance is the educational wing. We've got cat kennels on the left side, dog kennels in the rear. Basically, the medical clinic is on the front right side. And then all the administrative wing is back in the center of that area.
Can you see my cursor at all, everybody?
We can.
Okay.
That's just an enlarged view of that. These are the elevations as we've developed them. Looking for a farmhouse kind of feel, especially with the context, and talked extensively with Andrea and her team about colors and materials, and you'll see some of that as we get into the next slides, which show the renderings that we've done. So view from the public parking lot, looking back at the main entrance, the medical center on the right side, the cat kennel area on the left center, and then on the far left side is the dog kennels in the back of the building. This is a view as you enter the front door. On the left side, again, where those lights are, the left side is the adoption entrance. We tried to highlight that and celebrate that so that's where the great things that happen here at the center occur. That stone piece on the left side is the educational wing, and as the final logo for the animal center occurs, that sign will be consistent with that final logo. And then on the left side, or the right side, where there's two lights, that's the impound entrance, where you surrender dogs. And this will give you an aerial shot looking at Mac Hatcher in the background, foreground being the public parking area. And you can see how the relationship of the main entrance, the administrative part, the medical wing on the right, the cat wing on the left, and then in the far back, the linear kennels for the dogs and the training area for the dogs. And then way in the back, between Mac Hatcher and the building, are the walking paths for walking the dogs. And it meanders through tree areas and grassy areas. It'll be a beautiful park back in the rear. So that's kind of the overall of where we are. And as Jim said, we're pricing the project now and getting it reviewed by the city for public comment or for code comments, and looking forward to taking the next step.
Anybody have any questions for 906 or us about any of this?
Kim, this is Glenn Adams, and if I may, you may not know the answer to this yet, but the school, it's going to be a dedicated roadway that will belong to the school. Is that correct?
That's correct. It'll be a private access drive that will be owned by and maintained by Franklin Christian Academy. Yes.
All right. So the county does not have to be involved in any maintenance of that roadway.
That's our understanding at this point. We haven't seen the access agreement yet, but that's the understanding with Franklin Christian Academy. They would maintain it in its current condition.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Plus, Glenn, we will have part of that access agreement will give us future connections to that access easement as well, if we want it.
Okay.
This is Kevin Benson. I have a question on the large animal holding area.
Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
Yes, we have a current holding station out at the landfill. I don't see that anywhere in this plan, a replication of that required area. Over.
Yeah, Kevin, it's in the, let me go back to the site plan. I'll show you where it is. It is this area. If you can see my cursor, Kevin, it's this area right here. That's the large animal holding area right there. Could you see my cursor?
No, I'm mobile. I'm in Fairview on telephone right now, but I'm looking at the slides. What slide number is it?
It's a site plan, the Kimberley Horn site plan. It would be inside the fence on the northeast quadrant of inside the fence, above that parking area, staff parking.
Okay.
You see that fenced area? That's the large animal holding area right there.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? We're pretty excited about the way this looks. I think it's going to be a beautiful project. Andrea, are you on the call?
Hey, Jim, I'm not Andrea, but I do have a question. Can you kind of, if you don't mind, kind of touch on the parking, the numbers? I know that's was a little issue, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I might have to, I can't give you the count off the top of my head, and this is not the site plan that has the parking counts on it. I know there's ample parking back here for the staff. We've gone over that with Andrea. We have an area back here also for the animal control officers and their trucks. There's a washout station back over in this area. I'll have to get back with you on the actual total counts, Rogers. I can't pull that off memory.
Hey, Jim. Jim, this is Brandon. I found it in our civil. We've got 107 parking spaces provided, and then 4 ADA spaces, and then 6 bike spaces.
That's including staff parking as well, right?
Yes, that's total parking spaces provided.
Yeah, so it looks like we probably have around 80 or so parking spaces for public and the balance being staff. I'm just guessing that just by looking at it.
So my Jim, is a follow up on that. At the current animal center, when you drive by at Mycatcher, of course, you see the whole back side of the animal center, all of our trucks and gates and stuff like that. I certainly wouldn't want to build a new facility and have all that staring us down. There are some trees there that'll buffer it a little better than what's there, but
Yeah, so we have landscaping along the perimeter, and also, Rogers, this area right here, if you can see my cursor.
I'm following it.
Okay, that is a totally fenced in, opaque fence area right there where we're kind of calling that the back of house. So that's where all the unsightly things will be located, and it'll be out of view from the public.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Okay, anything else for Jim and oversight?
Only other thing I want to do real quick is if I can figure out how to bring it up, is I want to just quickly show you the schedule.
While you're trying to get that up, Brown, can you go through our architects and be sure that we've got ample electronics for IT of the future? Just make me feel good about that.
We have Perry Parrott and his team have been through the building multiple times, been through the plans multiple times. They've located where they want data drops, and they've actually included extra data drops in some places. So they've vetted the entire plan a couple of times. So we've met with them to be sure that they're satisfied with that.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm beginning to ask more and more questions because of what we've gone through for the last 100 days on COVID-19. In the event that we haven't COVID number 20 come up or something else, rather than always having to shut these operations down, what what can we do electronically to keep these things going for the most part? I realize our numbers have really been low. We had a lot of help from the outside people coming in and rescuing these dogs, but I hope we're giving a little attention to that too, Jim.
Yeah, that's probably a question Andrea could address. I think from a bandwidth standpoint and from a data drop and wireless access and all that, I think we'll have all that covered. But what operationally might have to change for that, I'm not sure. But we can ask Andrea and can follow back up if you like on that.
I think you just do it, make it feel comfortable. But if we got enough bandwidth, that's the big thing out there.
Yeah, if you recall, we got that data, that fiber drop coming in from the bypass that the city was already running. Matter of fact, their Stanza Electric is out there today, I think, putting that drop into our site as we speak.
Okay, thanks.
Rogers, this is Kevin. Andrea's got a good plan for a media room per se, photography room dedicated, which is really a great outlet for her to get the word out on the animals that are ready for adoption as well.
Thank you, Kevin.
Any other questions before I show you the schedule? If everybody can see the schedule on the screen right now, I want to point out the main difference is we had intended to start grading May 19th here at the bottom of and now that has been pushed out to the 1st of August. We think the build time for this is about 12 months. So we're hoping that we still hit this August date or early September date in 2021, which was our original completion was September 15th. So we're hoping to still hit that date, but we're pushing this on out into the end of November at this point. But we don't think that is where we're going to be. But so we think probably still August, September of next year will be the finish date. But this is what we'd like to submit is the revised schedule, which will allow our updates now to be more accurate than they are. I don't know if there needs to be official approval of that or not, but that's what we'd like to submit is the revised schedule.
Bobby, do we need to take a vote on that or?
No, you do not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
So that's our report for today. Anybody has any more questions, we'll be happy to answer them, but things are moving along nicely.
Great, thank you, Jim. That is a beautiful site, beautiful pictures, and I think now that we can see something visually, I think the excitement level is going to go up.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the Grisham Smith presentation of the Williamson County Justice System Master Plan. Steve Johnson's going to present that to us.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There'll be several of us speaking, and Jeff Coonan will be driving the presentation for us. And hope most of you had a chance to preview the presentation. It is a lot of material, and much of it you have seen before, but some of it you have not. So we will go fairly quickly over what you have seen earlier, and then we will slow down a bit for the new material. And of course, ask questions at any time. Jeff, please go to the agenda slide.
I assume that means that everybody can see the slideshow.
I can see it, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
We can see
Okay,
it.
great.
This is Glenn Adams, may I interject just for a second and thank y'all so much for getting this out to us beforehand. Made all the difference in the world. So
Well,
thank
you're
you.
welcome. You're welcome. I realize it is a lot of material. So, all right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to do a very quick recap, but we're going to present this by judicial component, which I think it makes it easier to understand. So we will go through juvenile, the jail, the sheriff's office, and the courts, and then we will talk about implementation and the rolled up costs and next steps. And the new material you will be seeing for the first time is the updated jail functional diagram and all of the operating cost for each component, the rolled up total cost, and the beginnings of the implementation plan. It is still a work in progress. Go to the recap slide for me, Jeff. Just to quickly remind everyone, the components of the work we've been doing over the last year and plus a little bit longer than a year is pretty in-depth facilities operation with assessments of the physical facilities, forecasting of needs, then recommendations about operational processes, and then we developed operating principles and a macro space program. Then we worked on the site and functional diagrams with capital costs associated with that. And then our last piece in a lot of the new material today is the operational cost of the components and the implementation timeline of that. Now, as we go through this, Curtis Pulitzer will be speaking to the key operating recommendations, the macro programming, and the operational cost. Jeff will take us through the functional diagrams, and also on the call is John Thayer with Bell Associates, who has put together the costs, the capital costs, and the implementation timeline. Of course, and in the last few weeks, Jim Cross has been added to the team. So we've been having meetings with Jim and getting his input and getting him plugged in on the information and the implementation discussions. Okay, with that introduction, I'm now going to turn it over to Curtis to begin kind of rolling through this material. So Curtis, I think you're still on mute, Curtis. There we go.
Okay, yeah. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see some of you on screen. Sorry we can't be there in person for this major presentation. With me today on the call on this WebEx are some of my teammates who were responsible for various aspects of the project. You might see them on the screen. On the juvenile justice, she's actually on the call, Pamela De Toledo. On the jail and sheriff's office, Cheryl Goland. On the courts, Karen Albert. Patrick Jablonski, who is our statistician, our resident Williamson County resident, is on the call with us. And I think Judy Regina Whiteley, who worked on the healthcare, is on the phone as well. So with that, we have a lot of material, and we were happy to be able to send it out ahead of time because I know there was a lot to digest here. So I'm just going to do some quick recap on the material we reviewed before. So on the for the Juvenile Justice Center, the new facility we're planning, if you recall, we're planning for up to 6 courtrooms for the future, 1 large, 1 medium, and 4 small. Adequate support spaces for those. On the juvenile clerk, again, expanding their office because they're, you all know how cramped everything is right now up at Century Court site. So, getting more space for them and proper public interface. And on juvenile services, which are the office spaces, again, adequate space and storage to accommodate the future growth, which is very much in line with the growth of the county population. And again, creating a proper central intake is where petitions are filed. When people come in right now, it's a pretty crummy space. Jeff, next slide. So there are some new components that will be part of the new Juvenile Justice Center. One is the assessment center. This will be a new function where any juvenile either voluntarily coming in, maybe brought in through social services, maybe arrested, or however they arrive at the Juvenile Justice Center, will come in and be processed and be interviewed and assessed. Again, the goal is to return them back out to the community in some capacity, in some manner. They'll be interfaced with the family or guardians there, but it'll be a service hub that connects all juveniles to all needed services in the future. So this is a new function. We also have another new function in the facility called a Respite Center. Is really for status offenders, again, for those kids that have a safe place and a safe haven to be in until, again, hopefully they can be returned to the community, to their family or a guardian. And this is, again, something new that has not happened before, but it is best practice, is state of the art. And we have a 10-bed capacity for there with an expansion up to 20. The juvenile detention facility, and that's, again, we have that now, but this is going to be very different than what we have right now at Century Court. It's going to be following best practices. It's going to follow all the proper supervision requirements based on the Prison Rape Elimination Act, staffing ratios, based on direct supervision, et cetera. And we also have the Alternative Learning Center, which is there now, and that is run by Williamson County Schools, and that is going to be sites for up to 150 students. Next. So when we did the projections, when Patrick worked on those a while back, the population projections showed that by 2044, we would have an average daily population of 22 juveniles, 83% being male, 17% females, and the bed capacity numbers for future beds, you could have to add in what's called peak classification. If you recall, we had this conversation a while back. You know, the peaks and valleys were very high and low for juvenile facilities, much higher than for other types of detention. Just it never changes day. So what we plan for up to 40 by just 2 rather than 1 juvenile. Initially, Jeff, next slide, please. Okay, great. So we developed, and then you saw this, I believe, at our last presentation a while back. So we developed a macro operational principles program and macro space program by functional component. I think you all have seen it. There's a narrative that goes with each one of these components. These are the components I just spoke about a second ago. So on the left are all the component names. NSF, as you recall, is the net square feet of those spaces. If you remember, net square feet is the space between, wherever you're sitting right now in your office or bedroom, wherever the space between the 4 walls is your net square feet. Gross square feet is includes the corridors and connectivity to get the offices all the spaces to work together. And then we have exterior square feet. So the bottom line is gross square feet. It's about 140,000 gross square feet. And that gross square feet is what the cost estimates, which John Thayer will talk about in a minute. Next. So Jeff's going to talk about the site plan.
Okay, thanks, Curtis. So quickly for orientation, the image that you're seeing on the screen right now really shows the overall ultimate master plan, but the Juvenile Detention Center, courts, and ALC are here on the right-hand side. So construction of that building is among the first new pieces of construction to be done, but it requires the demolition of the existing Beasley building, which is currently on this site here on Beasley Drive, and what we're referring to as an improved roadway that connects back up to the north today as a parking lot. We've covered in general this building in the past, so I'll try to review it relatively quickly, but happy to ask or answer questions on it later on. The major components of the building, as Curtis said, on the ground floor, a public lobby space, clerk's office, central intake, and assessment center really creates sort of a one-stop shop that can be operated up to 24 hours a day as needed to deal with the juvenile population. Most of the ground floor is given to the Juvenile Detention Center and the Respite Center on either side of a main circulation spine that connects back to staff support, and then kitchen facility service center to the north. The building is ringed on 3 sides by parking, staff parking predominantly to the east and the west, and then public parking along Beasley Drive to the south, directly adjacent to and centered on the main public entry space. To the north is located the Alternative Learning Center, which is composed of administration space, classrooms and other flexible space, and a gymnasium. A drop-off is located there, as well as ALC staff parking on the north end. The major or a major driver of this scheme is both to provide a convenient and intuitive access point for the general public, but also provide behind the scenes a safe and secure circulation program for all the different functionings going on. So essentially anything north of this line where my cursor is above the public lobby and clerk's office is secure space. The second level is largely given to juvenile services and courts functions. So here again, the 2-story lobby space has vertical circulation that brings you to a decision point where you can either access a conference center that is programmed with multi-use facilities, juvenile services to the north, and then a main circulation corridor that takes you to all of the court spaces, as well as some seating, some general open seating out in front of those. This public area is separated from the secure judicial offices and their circulation, which are accessed via secure vertical circulation down to the ground level. And then those two, the public and the courts circulation areas, are separated again from these red zones here, which are vertical circulation and temporary holding for juveniles coming up from the detention center to attend court dates. So that's a quick overview of the juvenile services facilities. It's helpful, I think, to see this massing here. It gives you a sense. Here you see Beasley Drive, you see Century Court, the existing juvenile services and court is located over here where my cursor is. The sheriff is here, and then the adult jail is this collection of small 2-story buildings on the north side of that site. The Beasley building is the warehouse that's currently sitting on this site. This shows that demolished, and the juvenile facilities, the courts and ALC, all located in this site. Connected for easy access, but with entries differentiated by the different users. So the courts users in the access to detention here in the front and to the side where a vehicular sally port is. And then those students that are attending the ALC have a separate pickup and drop off point here to the north. Before I go on, any questions about the layout?
Yeah, this is Glenn Adams. Very quickly, I'm assuming that all the wishes of the people involved with this, y'all were able to meet, and that they are totally in agreement with everything here?
To my knowledge, yes, but I'll let Curtis confirm that.
Could you repeat your question? I'm sorry, Glenn. I didn't hear it.
Curtis, again, this is Glenn Adams, and I think this is probably an unnecessary question, but all the stakeholders, the juvenile people, you've had a tremendous amount of input from them, and I'm assuming that they are totally in agreement and pleased with everything that's been done here.
I think so, Glenn. We've had a lot of meetings with them. I think Zanny's on the phone. Zanny, do you want to concur?
Absolutely. The work that we put into this master plan, I think, is well reflected in this report.
Okay, thank you.
This is Kevin. I have one question on the rear access gate to the current public safety center. Right now, it shows that that is not in the plan. Are we going to dead that entryway?
I'm sorry, are we going to do what? Abandon? Is that what you said?
Yes. Are we going to eliminate that
Yeah.
rear exit for the public safety center where they have their rear
Yeah,
gate
finish
for
your question, sir.
deliveries?
I think the plan is, well, I thought that the plan was to maintain that, but Steve, do you have any thoughts on that?
Kevin, that is a good question. I don't think the diagram shows it clearly, but the intent was that access would be preserved depending on, it might have to be rerouted a bit, but the intent was that it would be preserved, yes. That's a good
Okay.
question. We need
Thank
to
you very
show
much.
that more clearly.
Thank you.
John, are you going to summarize the costs?
Yes, we're ready to move on to that. So just real briefly, since we went over this a couple of months ago, so what we did is we took, in developing the costs, we took the square footages and the space descriptions contained in the program and the operating principles. And we applied historical costs per square foot to each of those spaces. I do want to point out that these costs were all developed from projects that were either completed within the past 2 years or are under construction currently in this geographic market. So these are applicable costs to this market in this current time. There is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of movement in the market now. So we do have contingencies that we'll talk about later. And we have allowed for kind of our best guess at escalation based on the phasing plan, the implementation plan that we'll also look at later. So here you'll see, these are just the construction costs contained in each component. So these construction costs here are for the juvenile facility. The contingencies, fees, and FF&E costs are applied in a later slide. So you'll see here specifically for the juvenile facility, we've got construction costs of $44,609,000 plus an additional $675,000 for demolition of existing structures. I think that's it for construction costs.
Thanks, John. So the last piece was of the cost, which is again new information, is the operating costs. Again, we worked very closely with Zandy and her team in developing these costs. Pamela De Toledo from our office helped develop these. So they're basically broken out into sort of 4 categories: personnel costs, medical services contracts, because that's a fairly sizable chunk of change, other than personal services costs, and building maintenance and utility costs. And you'll see we have the same numbers, and you've seen from the presentation for the other components. So it's a pretty dramatic increase in the operating budget, but there's good rationale for why that's the case. On the personnel side, again, the county is continuing to grow, so we're having to add more staff to juvenile services. That we have 2 brand new components that certainly do not exist up on Century Court, and that is the assessment center and the respite center. And we also are looking at going with direct supervision in the detention component, meaning we'll have staff directly with the juveniles in their living areas, which is best practice. practices and also required by the Rape Elimination Act. So that adds a lot more staff. Remember, those are 24/7 personnel. So that adds a lot more personnel than is presently there today. Medical services, we're looking for 24/7 coverage around the clock, which we don't have presently, and the ability to provide better services and healthcare services to juvenile detention. And now we also have the Respite and Assessment Center as well. And we may be able to do some cost sharing with Williamson County Schools, and we've had some preliminary conversations with them as well about that. Other than personnel costs is basically the what we did is we looked at the cost per person presently for staff, and Pamela, if you want to explain that more, we can. Then we also had contractual services and supplies, and that's that number is 347,230. And the last is building maintenance and utility costs. Again, we have a much bigger building than we have presently. So we're going from about 25,000 up to 140,000. So of course the cost for running that building will be much higher than current costs. So the total operating costs for 2025 estimated is 10.4 million. Again, this will all be revised as we move through the design process, and you know this is a budget number for now, but we felt it was important to have something out there for you all to look at. So, any questions before we move on to the jail?
Curtis, real quick, this is Eric Bear of the PBA.
Yes, hi Eric.
Hi. Under the personnel costs, I'm assuming that many of these are fixed ads, the current staffing insufficient for caseloads. We would expect that we know the caseloads, we know how they need to be staffed, but the much of it is also a linear projection based upon county population growth. Do you know the split of that? You know, with those operating costs double just in personnel, how much is certain and how much is based upon projected growth?
That's a good question, Eric. Pamela, do you know that by any chance? Pam, could you unmute yourself? Pam? Pamela? No. He doesn't seem to be there.
If it helps, this is Karen Albert. If it helps, I will say that the personnel costs are based on basically full build out, which we realize won't happen right away. And so there are 2025 costs assumed, and also the longer term costs that have been identified. But for the most part, there are two pieces that are included in these costs. One is the future growth, and the other is the expansion of services that are available to the juveniles.
So Eric, also in the staff, you'll see in the master plan report when you get it, we do have a breakdown of existing personnel as well as additional personnel. So that would have it all there. I just can't pull it up right now because I'm on the screen with you all, but Pamela can get us unmuted. Pamela, are you there now? She's texting me, but she's not unmute. For some reason, she can't unmute herself. So we'll get that information to you, Eric, okay?
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, moving on to the jail. So again, on the jail, again, you've heard a lot of this before, but the plan is to, for the future, for the expansion and going into the future, that we would, again, here use direct supervision where the staff are inside the housing areas with the inmates managing and supervising them, which is not the case today. We're going to an open waiting area for people to process into the facility. Again, it's analogous to direct supervision, but it starts at the front door, and it's just part of the overall management philosophy. And we worked all this out through with Mike Dobbins. I think he's on the call today, and the sheriff's office. We're looking, obviously, trying to be more efficient in the new jail operations, minimizing inmate movement, decentralizing as many of the services as we possibly can, bringing staff and services to the inmates' areas and decentralized components. There's a big new focus on medical and mental health, which we all know, both here in Williamson and nationally, is a huge issue for our jail population. So this is a major change from today. We have 102 beds for mental health and 56 beds for healthcare. You can see the breakdown on the screen between male and female. We're going to be focusing on diversion and pretrial services. We built in space for that. We want to be able to divert people from jail. I think one of the things lessons learned is that right now through COVID, as you all know, the population of the jail has dropped dramatically. And we will, as we move forward, need to learn how that's happened. How
the presentation with you, but
I hear somebody else.
on the phone and
Can,
physically on my screen.
hello? Can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
I'm not connecting totally on the computer, but I'm on the call with you.
Somebody else is talking. Can you all hear me? Just nod your head. Yeah.
Don Dwar was talking in the background.
Oh, Don was in the back. Okay. All right. Thanks, Cheryl. Anyway, so yes, a focus on diversion and pretrial services and again, expanded opportunities for reentry. So we're looking at how can we maintain the jail population and keep it stable and not grow, maybe lower or extend the timeframes for any expansion work we do at the jail from what we project. Next slide. Again, this is a refresher on the projections. We looked at for the 2044 an average daily population of 624 inmates, 78% male, 22% female. But to that, we also added a peaking and classification, just like we have with the juvenile. So you can see on the table up on the screen, that adds about 12% for peaking. And that, again, in a jail, the peaks and valleys change dramatically day to day. And classification is the ability to properly house people, obviously can't mix males and females, but even different security levels, mental health, medical, all have to be separated. So we need to have enough space to be able to move the chess pieces around the chessboard, in other words, to get people properly housed. So the total bed need is higher. The total bed need is 530 is 760 by the time we get to 24. To accommodate that need in 2034 at a minimum. Next. So again, you've seen this before. These are all the components that are part of the jail. There's like 15 components from 1,000 down to 15,000, which is the parking, the net square feet, the gross square feet again, and the exterior area. So again, the gross square feet, as John explained earlier, that's how the cost estimates were developed. So the total gross square feet is for the jail. This is for the total, as for the complete build out for the jail. This is everything would be 335,600 square feet. Next. So I think Jeff's going to walk through the plans.
Yes, so back to our orientation master plan.
Jeff, just one point I forgot to mention. I think we may not have said Don Dwar's Justice Facilities Design is on the call with us as well. He's an integral part of the plan, especially for the jail and the courts. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Again, this is our master plan. A little while ago, we spoke about the juvenile facilities, services, courts, and ALC over here on the right-hand side. Now we're going to switch over and talk about the adult jail here in the center of the screen. As you can see, the adult jail is basically still located and reconfigured directly on top of the existing facility. And that really is the primary driver to the way that this facility has been laid out. So in essence, the issue here, unlike the juvenile, where we were basically able to demo an existing building and have a greenfield site to build a brand new facility while keeping the old facility in operation. Here we've got to build the new facility on top of and around and in the existing facility while that existing facility stays in operation. So I'm going to walk through the phasing for that here next. I can advance the slide. Here we go. Okay. Phase 1A is a 3-story addition that basically will result in the development of a new ground level chassis that deals with all of the intake and release, vehicular sally port to the side, a main lobby space for access by the general public, centralized jail administration space, staff support, and security operations. This basically works as a freestanding 3-story pod that is connected by a corridor into the central circulation spine of the existing facility here, which has bed pods and then all of those existing functions for intake and public entry existing down here. So those continue to operate while this is developed, this new front door. 36 beds on the ground level. The second level is several different pods of beds associated with a different program. Curtis mentioned before mental health, medical detox, etc. A major medical and health related component of this facility, and it's located on the second level of this building. Third level of the building moves to more of a, I guess if you can call it a generally standard housing operation in 3 major pods here. Altogether, phase 1A on 3 floors has a little bit less than 400 beds. And what's driving that is the need to be able to have swing space so that as we move on to future stages, we can begin to take out of service or demolish existing beds without diminishing the overall capacity of the facility. And that's in fact what happens here as we move into phase 1B. I should mention actually before I leave this, way up here on the north side of the slide, a new freestanding maintenance and central plant facility. We think there's a lot of advantage in getting that disentangled from the rest of the facility so that it can serve the existing facility and the future facilities as they begin to come online without building in our own way. So phase 1B demolition. Initially, we had explored concepts that proposed reusing some of the existing bed pods for the building, although we always intended to demolish completely this building here to the north and west and its counterpart just south. Our investigation of the existing facilities determined that the existing structure and the way those buildings are assembled is so dependent on the specific arrangement of the interior space that it was unlikely to be cost effective or practical to try to retain those buildings and then lay them out differently on the inside. So our approach here has been to assume that we will completely demolish those facilities over the course of a couple of phases and build brand new facilities that are more flexible but also meet the programming and functional criteria that we've established. So a much simpler layout, much more flexible, a total of 256 beds here on this level on the north side. Oh, excuse me. Also part of the 1B construction is the development of really the service function that will support the entire facility. So again, taking some of the functions, food service, laundry, warehouse that are located today further south in the facility and building a new, more flexible, more efficient facility that is sized properly to meet the ultimate build out of this facility here on the northwest side. And really, once we've done that, we've put ourselves in a position where we can completely disconnect the new facility from the old facility, as all of the functions that were located there have been redeveloped here to the north. And then the last phase here, phase 1C, is really about the demolition of the existing south bed pod and planning for future growth, as you can see here in this diagram. So the stacking for all that looks about like this. We talked about the Juvenile earlier, the kind of peach colored building here on the right hand side of the page. The adult jail facility is located up here in the purple. In the center north side of the page, you see the maintenance and central plant facility here. Excuse me. And you see the 3-story phase 1A all the way through the future 2-story phase 1C. So all of this construction takes you out to the ultimate planning horizon. Certainly, there can be discussion about when all of this needs to come online, and we've contemplated whether you build, for example, phase 1C immediately, or do you delay that based on the population and what we learn over the next 25 years. But this is the overall layout. And at this point, really, even though we're showing this existing facility down here to the south, what's remaining of it, the only thing in this diagram that would still occupy this space is the sheriff's administrative office space, which is in the area that my cursor is pointing at here. Any questions about the overall layout?
Jeff, this is Glenn Adams. When we're in the planning and you were talking about whether to, build out on the front end or you wait, will we be ahead of the game here, however we do this? In other words, we're not going to be working from behind.
I think the way that we have planned this based on our projections is with the intention of being ahead of the game. Now, I mean, obviously that's notwithstanding, any circumstances about policy that change or what have you, but based on the mix of policies, the way that we're approaching, determining who ultimately is detained in the facility, our sense or our expectation is that we will always be out ahead of the anticipated population.
Thank you.
And I also might add on this drawing, there's a significant elevation drop between the purple building, which is the jail, and the peach building, which is juvenile services. And we're very sensitive to the jail sort of overlooking down on the juvenile services center. So we have incorporated plans. There'll be really no visibility from that sort of south side view, which is facing the building down to the juvenile area, in terms from the housing areas, and as well there'll be landscaping, and trees in between the two, which are not shown on this drawing. So,
right,
if anybody had some concerns about that, we've addressed that.
Yeah. In fact, the juvenile housing pods are located literally on the opposite side of the juvenile facility from the adult detention area. So we've despite the, I guess, practical reality of the relatively close quarters of these two facilities, we've, as Curtis said, taken a lot of consideration about visibility and the potential sight lines, and taken multiple measures to control those or mitigate those. Okay.
And if I could, this is Annie. One thing that I want to say on that note is that while we understand that the layout is important for purposes of the master plan, the big picture, I will tell you that we're very hopeful to have further discussions about the layout of the juvenile detention center being sort of the most visible component when you pull up to the building. So it's my understanding, though, that that happens in the next phase when we begin working with an architect. But since we're discussing it, I just want to say that it's not necessarily ideal that the detention center be the most visible component when when the public arrives to the building. But we understand the need for it based upon the fact that the jail is 3 stories and behind us.
I think that's a great point. Again, at this stage, we're talking about functional diagrams and proof of concept and order of magnitude, and there are a whole host of architectural considerations that would be layered on to the next phase in terms of what are the exterior building systems, how do we treat edges between public areas. So, for example, the gray light gray public parking here versus the darker gray secured staff parking, and how do we control sight lines between those areas is a key part of the next stage of development. Okay, John?
Okay, so pretty much the same process was used to develop the construction costs for the jail as the juvenile. So I won't go back through that again. So you'll see here that we've got about $99,763,000 in construction costs, plus $2.6 million in demolition costs. And then we're also carrying a line item of about $4.5 million for phasing and temporary construction. So as Jeff described and walked through, there's a lot of phasing as part of this jail construction. You know, we tear down a component, we build a component, we tear down a component, we build a component. So that phasing cost is to cover things like multiple mobilizations from different subcontractors. It's to cover temporary access and entrances into the buildings. It's to cover things like temporary heating and cooling and power systems as we move through this phase construction of the jail.
I've got a question on the last slide. Why no abatement? You don't think that we will have to go through that?
Any abatement would be rolled into that demolition number.
Oh, okay.
And really that's kind of a big unknown is the extent of the abatement. I think we did understand from a walkthrough that we had with the sheriff's department that at least some has been done in that facility, but maybe not completed.
Thanks, John. So on the operating costs, again, Charlotte Golath from our office spent a lot of time working on this with myself, Mike, and Dusty, Sheriff Rhodes. So this is a little bit more complicated chart than the prior one, because what we have here, again, on the left, the personnel costs, and other than personnel costs, which are driving the numbers. I guess the main difference, the two main differences are, one, we're going from an indirect to direct supervision, which I said earlier. And we're also enhancing programmatic and treatment services, and again, expanding medical mental health. Those are where the big numbers really are. And on third and the fourth actually beats a much bigger building. But there's 4 columns on the right, and the FY19 is the current FY19 budget. And then you see FY19 adjusted, and it's important to know what that number is. We actually, right now, what's missing in some of the coverage factors for the jails is called a shift relief factor, which would add additional personnel to cover positions to account for vacation, sick time, and the fact that it's a 24/7 post, for example. So right now, a lot of those variables or factors, rather, are not built into the current staffing. So what we did is we took the FY19 and we adjusted it up to account for those variables. And Cheryl, correct me if I said anything incorrectly here. And then, so that's really that $10.3 million number is sort of where we would like the current jail budget to be. We then said if we take that adjusted budget and we converted the current housing best practices into direct supervision, given the configuration and the layout, which is one of the reasons why we're not reusing those buildings, as Jeff said earlier, the cost to run that facility would jump dramatically, you know, 10.3 million to 13.2 million. So when you look at that number and compare that to the projected number, the 2025 number of 14.8, those two numbers are more apples and apples comparison. So it's difficult on a jail when you're changing the paradigm so dramatically to look at the staffing numbers and personnel and operating costs and say, wow, this is a big jump. But if you apply some of these adjustments to it, the numbers don't seem as large. Especially if you're looking at the number of 13.2, when you get it down to per diem, and the per diem is what does it cost per day to operate the jail. You can see what the current costs are and the adjusted costs, but if you were to convert it to direct supervision, that per diem actually would be higher than what we're proposing for 2025. So that's important to note because that points out to the efficiencies of the layout and design that we're proposing. So it's a little hard to understand potentially, but the staffing ratio would be higher on the adjusted and direct supervision conversion than it is in the proposed plan we're recommending. So we just wanted to show that, so for purposes of comparison, so we have more of an apples and apples approach. Carol, did I do that okay?
You're terrific. You did terrific.
Thank you. Next slide. So now we're moving on to the, I'm sorry, any more questions before we move on to the sheriff's office? Okay. So the sheriff's office, similar to, presented to you before, something needs to be on mute. I'm hearing some background noise here. I don't know. Again, what was some of the key planning considerations? One was consolidating the operations. Right now, the sheriff's office is spread out among 4 locations, and we're down to 2 locations. 6 of the 7 divisions would now be in a single location. Major expansion of shared support areas, which is really lacking presently in Century Court and other areas. Again, creating an environment with increased sensitivity to victims and witnesses and the public coming in. Creating a proper evidence storage and processing area, which does not exist today. Really working on developing an FAA and EPA compliant aviation hangar, an area for the helicopters. Developing a more improved gun range, and we're still hoping to be able to share and work with the city of Franklin and expanding the current gun range. There's still conversations going on with that, so that has not reached its conclusion yet. Creating a proper armory, because right now it's really spread out among several locations, so there are safeguards and ventilation issues that really need to be addressed as we go forward. And eliminating the access right now, because the access to something like patrol is right inside the jail, so we really separate all the jail functions from the sheriff's office operations. Next. So what drove the growth? Again, similar to juvenile services, crime rate has increased, the clearance rate is higher, the arrest rate has gone down a little bit. But if you look at the growth statistics at the bottom of the page, you see that the overall growth of the county has been driving these numbers up, and that in turn requires a corresponding increase in terms of personnel for the sheriff's operations. Next. So similar to the other components, we developed a program document. There were 10 major components here. The special ops component is very much, that's a lot of the vehicles and also the helicopter operation. In our plan, that would also be some of the CID functions will be located there as well, and training functions, etc. And so the total square footage for the sheriff's operation headquarters would be 109,400. Some functions will remain, like the court services shows as a 0. It's not that they don't have it, but those functions are built into the courts program, which we'll get to next. So those operations would stay downtown in the court judicial center area, as well as some of the warrants operations would also remain in the future downtown at the judicial services. Next. So now we'll get into the layouts.
Okay, so returning to our master plan, juvenile detention, adult jail. Here in the center, the sheriff's function is really spread out over several different locations, though. So if you recall previously, I said that the portion of the remaining existing jail facility that housed the sheriff's administration space is sort of right here about the center of the slide. So for them to vacate, one of the things that's required is for a new sheriff's office building to be constructed, and that's located down here. About 60-ish thousand square feet of the area that Curtis mentioned a moment ago would be located in that facility, and it's primarily training and general office space. There is part of the ground area outside is a canine training field, although the dogs are not being housed in this location. Another opportunity that we have with this site plan is to really connect Beasley to Century Court here. So underneath this legend is really where the roadway comes in that connects to the existing jail. Another key thing is the repurposing of the existing recycling facility up on the plateau above the site to contain the majority of that sheriff's special operation. So the idea here is to take a building that is generally an open warehouse, strip it down to the structure, and then repurpose it for its new function. So what's nice about this space is that we have ample outdoor area to accommodate helicopter operations, impound lot, and then special ops staff parking nearby. And then the third area up to the north is expanding the gun range. So the box labeled Phase 1A is where we talked about the central plant and maintenance facility for the adult jail is located, but the rest of the space up here is really about taking the existing gun range and expanding it, basically, I think approximately doubling its capacity and improving the parking. Currently, some of that space is the impound lot that is being relocated with special ops. So a little bit, here we go, a little bit more detail of the program of what's fitting into the special ops facility. As I mentioned before, the helicopter pad, impound lot, special parking, service yard, main entry space. It's a lot of storage, but it is an opportunity to do several things right, particularly the armory space here, how we house the helicopters, etc. The Sheriff's Administrative Office building has a front door that faces effectively towards Century Court. So visitor parking here, sheriff staff parking in the rear, admin space, patrol, lobby, CID, proper evidence storage, as Curtis mentioned before, all on the ground floor. On the second floor, general office space and training. So a flexible training center up on the second floor. So a quick look overall. You see the expanded gun range up here to the north. You see the sheriff's building, basically two 30,000 square foot floor plates stacked up here. And you see the special ops space over here, conveniently designated by the helicopter. Any questions about the layout?
So very briefly, same process to develop the construction costs for the sheriff's office and the special ops building. I do want to point out that we broke this down into two separate estimates. This first sheet shows the sheriff's office at just over $26 million with $350,000 for demolition. And the next slide shows the special operations building with about just over $12 million in construction cost, and then again, $350,000 for demolition.
Thanks, John. So again, here the operating costs for the sheriff's office, again, a lot of it being driven by the growth in the county. So we would see an increase in the personnel, primarily in patrol and traffic, as we all know how big an issue that is right now in Williamson County. Expanding school resource officers, we have new schools coming online, so we need more SROs, and we need more criminal investigators to really accommodate the growth of what's happening with crime and arrests, etc. We also applied here, like on the jail, the shift relief factor to select posts. So it wasn't a blanket situation, more like at the jail, but there were some posts that needed to be able to accommodate additional personnel to cover their 24/7 operations. And on the other than personnel services costs, again, an increase because the buildings, there's more square footage, so the maintenance utilities costs are higher. But then also the other costs relating to cruisers, supplies, educational materials, communication equipment, radios, maintenance, etc., was going to go up proportionally with the growth of the sheriff's office operations. So the operating budget in FY19 was about $17.5 million, and that would increase to about $22.6 million in 2025. All right, we'll move on to the courts if there are no other questions. So on the courts, again, Karen Albert from our office is on the phone, and Don Dwar were primarily responsible for developing the analysis of the court needs. But again, population growth here again is a driving factor. We're looking at, and Patrick Jablonski did the statistical analysis on this too, looking at a total of 10 courtrooms in the future with 2044. We need to improve the circulation within the courthouse, providing improved circulation for the public, the judges and inmate populations, keeping those all separate. Providing a better environment within the courtroom, so we have natural light, which is where we see most courthouses going today. We need improved secure parking for the judiciary and the clerks and special master, clerk and master. We need increased security and public queuing at the entrance. It was an afterthought when that building was built, so that really has to be improved. The whole Sallyport area, down where we're bringing inmates in from the jail, is too small and really needs to be much more secure. It's open to the air right now. The connectivity between the two courthouses, the old historic and the new one, needs to be improved. And again, as you heard from us before, we'll see in a minute, the historic courthouse will become a very important element in the growth of the court operations down there. There's a lot of space there which are going to now recapture as far as the court growth is included, is expanded rather. EPS elevator access, and then expanding spaces for discrete conversations between attorneys and clients. Again, something that's sorely missing at the current courthouse. Next. So they were the growth projections in terms of filings and hearings for general session, circuit, general session civil, circuit civil, and chancery. Again, the primary, the increases are most substantial in the general sessions criminal and circuit, and again, the civil, huge increase in there. With all the corporations coming into Williamson County, the civil general sessions cases will really be projected to grow dramatically. So similar to the other three components, we have the space revenue summary. There are 10 components here. One new function, which is new and it also shows up on the personnel, is the position of court administrator, somebody to actually manage the court operations day to day. We see these in courthouse and court systems as big as Williamson, especially the way you're growing. So we see that as a function that's going to be necessary as time goes forward. Some expansion in the court book areas and obviously the courts themselves. But again, you'll see the layout, how that all lays out. Court operations by security operations, which are the sheriff's operations, will also see a major expansion. There's definitely not enough space there. We do show the DA here as a possibility. I think that right now that's something to be seen in the future, whether that, right now it's not in the plans, but we did include it in the planning if that's indeed possible to have the DA within this building. They're in very awful space right now, and the proximity to the courts would be a great advantage for them as well. Public defender would remain in their current operations. Next. So Jeff will walk you through the plan.
I'm back. I apologize if I have background noise. Apparently they've elected to deep clean every space around me and drill holes and hammer on the floor above me. So apologies for that. Here you see a diagram that basically locates us Judicial Center, the new Judicial Center, the historic courthouse and its annex, and the existing parking structure. And there's actually relatively minimal new construction associated with this, but there is some more significant interior renovation that is contemplated as part of this program. That basically is saying that a majority of the square footage that's required to support what needs to happen with courts really mostly already exists today, but there is a need for some major reconfiguration and utilization of underutilized space. So here's a first floor plan that shows the existing historical courthouse, its annex, and the existing new judicial center, and also begins to show you how we are making improvements to the vehicular sally port, how we are expanding the holding capacity for the facility, and then finally providing some secure parking for judges to be located here. So this nice thing about this is that we've got a large grassy area today that we can expand into, and the program is such that we can maintain reasonable distance from the existing house structure on the corner here, which is, I think, a nice piece of the fabric of downtown. Actually turning the historic courthouse back into a courthouse is the key motivation over here, but also utilizing a lot of the office space that is available in that facility. Second floor level, you see the general sessions courts and then two new courts stacked up on top of the judges parking, and then along with that, judicial offices. So this really fits nicely into a T configuration with the existing judicial offices here, connecting to a secure environment for people working in those areas. Separate from that, the public space in yellow, which connects to the front of the new courtrooms and then utilizes the existing connector to the historic courthouse and its annex in this area, and the addition of a new circuit court up here on the north side. And then lastly, adding an additional level, so turning a two-story or having a three-story structure, excuse me, as the expansion to the facility, given that the ground level is predominantly parking and holding, the only place to go was up, so we have two additional courts stacked on top of that, all utilizing the same general circulation resources, so a very efficient use of real estate and investment in infrastructure to move people around. Any questions about the courthouse configuration? Okay. John?
Okay, so same exact process. except that the only difference you'll see here is that because we're renovating existing spaces and those spaces are spread between two different buildings, essentially, we lumped the numbers as 23.
The thought there, is there somewhere, or is that just that could be possible?
Glenn, this is Steve. Let me answer that. That is work. That's not resolved what the answer to that is. We have recommended, and there's been some preliminary conversations with various parties about a parking facility downtown that is shared, and there are several different potential locations. It is a major component of this. There will be more over time. There will be more demand for parking, and that, in our opinion, as the planning team, is that should be a joint effort between the county and the city because it serves many different masters downtown. So that's why we haven't plugged a number into it, because we just didn't know what to plug in. An underground garage on the location there is the most expensive solution, and there are other alternative sites. There are shuttle operations. There are many different ways to solve parking problems. So that's a bit of an open-ended issue. If anybody else wants to join in with my explanation of that, if I missed something, but that's kind of where that is right now.
One, if I may, just one more quick question. Do you, or does anyone know the attached parking garage that's there now? Does anyone have any idea how many spaces are in it?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember.
I think there's roughly about 220 to 250 in that garage, I believe, but somewhere in that range.
Okay, that helps me. I was just trying to get a feel for what size place we'd be talking about. So thank you for the answers.
A part of the answer typically is a comprehensive downtown master parking plan that would try to accommodate all the various users and then appropriately designate and create strategies for different kinds of parking. Very good question, Mr. Adams.
Glenn, you can see that also we had 225 spaces, I believe, for parking. So that garage, if that garage was all belonging to the courts, we'd be in good shape. Right now, it's not.
Unfortunately.
Right.
Glenn, also, I think that particular, that parking issue related to the courts downtown is the critical path for that project. So I'm not sure that could move forward, at least with the expansion. Maybe the renovation of the existing courthouse could happen without it, but the expansion, this additional parking is going to have to be identified before that can move forward. I don't think there's any way to push any more cars downtown with the current situation.
Well, I agree with you totally, and that had been my question back some time ago as to whether or not we could actually move forward with this without some further plan. But anyway, again, I thank y'all for the answers.
Glenn, the internet says that the capacity of the 4th Avenue garage is 336 spaces.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Jeff.
I missed it by a few.
So the last slide is on the court, just like on the other sections of the personnel costs. There are 3 columns here. We're not looking for a major increase in personnel in the next couple of years by 2025. We're looking at some increase in the clerks, the addition of the court administrator I mentioned earlier. We actually have the 2 2025 budgets, one with the expansion and one without. In theory, we have enough space right now with some minor renovations to be able to accommodate the caseload growth. Again, with the help of a court administrator to better, in terms of the time utilization of courtroom time, to be able to stick with the current buildings, because the expansion, the current utility cost for the buildings right now is $650 a square foot. as we go forward, maintenance and expansion, we're looking at $8 a square foot. So that adds in a lot. That $906,000 is for the full complete build out. So it's unclear right now, how we're proceeding, and that's part of the implementation plan. We'll get to in a minute. So that's why there are two different numbers are shown there. So I think that concludes our. So far, I think Steve, you're next. I think.
Yeah, the next segment here, we're coming toward the end. We're going to run over a few minutes. I appreciate everyone's patience. A lot of material. This is the roll up of the cost. And Jeff, if you could go to the next slide. This is a roll up of all of the costs associated, and it's organized into 3 columns of construction cost, which we've gone over. And then the total capital budget, which means it's construction cost plus all of the fees, contingencies, FF&E or furniture, fixtures, and equipment, plus an escalation factor, which you can see the growth from 214 million to 281 and some change is the all-in loaded number of the capital cost, and then the summation of the operating costs that Curtis went over in each component. So at a very, very high level, those are all of the cost components rolled up together into one chart. So I will. Then the last piece of our conversation here is what I mentioned earlier, is the implementation discussion. And Jeff, put the big chart next. Go to the next slide. Okay, I realize this is impossible to read and understand, but in the way we're working through this with the team is that the logic of this chart, all the tasks on the left are everything that we understand that needs to happen to implement this master plan. So it has the material, the functions that need to be moved out of Beasley to make way for Juvenile. It has the sequencing of that, the design sequencing of everything, and then the construction sequencing. And in the black boxes, it shows potential opening days for the various construction of the different components. And it's organized around the idea. And again, this is a starting point. This is not the final implementation chart, but it says that a work takes place initially to do more detailed programming and schematic design and more detailed design of all the components. And then this, theoretically, you can see a vertical line running down into the chart, which then has a theoretical launch of all of the components, the implementation of all the components happening in parallel fashion. And it's a bit of an exercise in comparing how long it takes to do all the different pieces. And then some assumptions were made about the early phase stuff. The archives building needs to move. The maintenance building needs to get out of the way. The potential exists for using Beasley 300 for some of this, which is not completely resolved or understood yet. And that's where Jim has joined the team and is providing some leadership and some really good thoughts about how to navigate that. So there will be more follow-up on this implementation strategy. It will take a little more time. There's also the reality of the county being able to finance this, and using models of when funds can become available and how does the county have effective and careful stewardship of its financial resources to do this. That will be layered into this chart. But this is the beginning point that shows about how long it takes to do the components and compared to each other, how that rolls out. It is a complicated piece of work. And let's go to the last slide, and we can come back to this one in a minute, just so you understand our logic. Now, this is the chart I went over just a moment ago, which was all of the capital costs. This is then breaking it out by year based on the previous timeline this is roughly the amounts of expenditures that chart requires to build out all 4 components of the master plan. So you see the dollar amounts extended over several years of how it could unfold based on the previous theoretical implementation strategy. So I will stop talking and we can entertain questions and discuss this and elaborate on it some more. I would invite Jim to join the conversation here and give your perspective on this, Jim, if you don't mind starting that.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So first of all, let me say we're really excited about being involved with this project. It's can y'all hear me okay, by the way?
Yes, yeah, loud and clear.
Yes, Tim, I can hear you.
And so what we've done to date is we've met multiple conversations and meetings with the master plan team to understand all the different components. We have toured all the buildings with the exception of the jail, and Dusty and I talked this week about setting a time up for us to come over and do that. We've also met with Judge Guffey and Zany Martin at Juvenile Services. So we're just starting to meet with everybody and trying to wrap our hands around all of this. I think I would look at this master plan as a very fluid document. It basically identified all the areas of need that are out there and how we address those. But is this master plan, as it's currently laid out, the way it is going to end up? Possibly could, or it could be something different. Things change, different properties become available. So I think this is going to be a very fluid situation. And I know everybody's anxious to really drill down and get into the details of this. I would also think of this as a funnel. We have a pretty wide opening right now, and as we move forward, that will start to narrow focus. But right now we have, in the 400 building, for example, there are multiple departments in that building. It's not just the sheriff and special ops. Archives is in there, Parks and Rec is in there, property maintenance is in there. There's multiple people in there. And the current plan is special ops would move up to the recycling building. And then that leaves multiple departments that are in the 400 building without a home. So we've got to figure out where they go. Archives has got to build a new building before they can get out. And so you can start to see that there are multiple pieces to the puzzle. And then we have the funding side of this as well. And we've had a couple of calls with Nina and Leslie and Rogers and their bond counsel and the person they work with on bonding and how this funding is going to go. So there's that piece of the puzzle as well. So we'll start to put all this together and hopefully all the pieces will start to come together. The one thing that Rogers has asked us to do, we've talked to the master plan team about this, is, this plan is designed for a 30-year growth. And so we want to identify early on what needs to be done now. Back to Glenn's original question is, we want to be sure that we're moving forward and not backwards. So what needs to be done now? What could be put off to the future? And so identify those costs associated with that to try to narrow this scope down to where it's not maybe as big a pill to swallow as it currently is now. So we'll be working with the team to try to identify that and to identify those costs to see where we can come up with a total number. And I think Rogers is, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he's anticipating having maybe a work session with the county commission in August. And then after that, we will decide what the best approach would be moving forward for the architect, and then we would decide how we move forward with that. But this project reminds me of the old saying about how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So we'll just take one bite at a time and continue to march this ball down the field. And I think we're ultimately gonna get there. Roger, you want to say anything about the work session?
Yeah, first of all, let me say thanks to all of the people that have put in the time and the energy to get us to this point. It's probably the most complicated program that we've got and that I've seen in my lifetime as being in the elected area. And no question, we've identified the priorities that juvenile is first, and then jail, and then on to the courts. And all of the components, as Jim has outlined, and the different Beasley buildings that we've got to find homes for. We, at the suggestion of just calling on prior experience, Mr. Chairman, and others that are still on here, we do need to have an educational update for our county commission, because this really spans about or could span into 2 different election cycles, and we want to be able to do that and fund that in a systematic way that one election cycle doesn't cause problems for someone else in the next election cycle. In the business world, you don't have to really worry about that in the political arena. There's lots of reasons for people wanting to change, and one of them is cost savings. But this, when you start talking the kind of money that you're talking for the entire project here, it should be dealt with in a cautious but expeditious manner. And that's just the way we do things in Williamson County. It took us a long time to do the public safety building. It's taken us a long time to do the animal center and many other projects that I can think about. But at the end of the day, they're good projects and they were worthwhile. And we bring people along so they feel comfortable with those kind of numbers. Bobby, if you're still on here, I don't know if you, Bobby, are you still here before I ask my question? Bobby Cook.
I am.
Oh, great. So one of the things I would think that everyone is wondering on, how do we bid this project out? What can we do? And we've had discussions with Bobby and Jim, who's not now on board. He's done a great job for us over at the Animal Center, and he's already working with Steve and all the team members there. And so there are some limitations that we can do. There are some things that we can do, but we've got limitations on legally what we can do, about architects and different things like that. So, Bobby, if you don't mind, just kind of touch on, refresh for the team members that are here for the minutes, that we can reflect what public building authority can do and what they can't do.
I'm glad to. As everyone already knows, Oversight has been chosen to be the owner's rep. The next one that we will seek to get on board is the architect. Now, as you know, the Public Building Authority has a vast amount of authority over what the county has. One of the things that under the PBA can be done is that if there is a professional, if you have an architect or engineer who is already under contract on a certain project, you can expand that scope to include, in this case, it would be the architect services, because we already have one that's doing the planning. The PBA can also go out and request for proposals or qualifications for other architects. When it comes to your contractors, however, we do have to go through the process of competitively procuring those services, whether it's by proposal or bid. I think that about covers it. Rogers, if there's another you would like.
No, I just wanted to refresh people's memory. I'm sure, and I'm very, very pleased with Grisham and what they've done in their team. I think they've been very deliberate. I think they're very professional. I think they have delivered up until this point an outstanding product for us to build on. I haven't fully decided what the next step is, because there's some elements. I mean, you can make a pro and con list of accepting the architect that we have now for the master plan. I think we can make a good point for that. There's There's the other side from the political side that you always have to be able to answer in the world I live into. But at the end of the day, what I would expect and from whatever procedure that we get through is that we have the best price for our taxpayers' interest here. If we decide to go the route of accepting who we've got, then I would expect Grisham and Smith to have the same or better price, an equal price to what they would if we go through a competitive pricing. There's economies of scale that you have to take into consideration. If you take another architect say, well, Grisham did all right, but, and they'll want to change things. And that's the nature of the beast. That's why they make all the different brands of automobiles. We all like different aspects of it. But I don't want to reinvent the wheel with another master plan when we're rolling down the road. So Jim can help a great deal in this by being the owner's rep, the owner being the county, and kind of holding our hand, but at the same time holding their hands. So we'll come to that decision here in the not too distant future. But you got to put all these components together, just like Grisham has over the last several months, is building what they have got to today. And we need to not take 18 months to do it, but we certainly need to look at the numbers, because that's a lot of money for taxpayers to kind of swallow. And anytime you're talking about jails and juvenile issues, they're not real happy about spending tax dollars on that, but they're required by law to do that.
So is it as easy as someone just making a motion at this point, if that's what we decide to do, to keep them on, and then we can just move forward? I mean, is that, Bobby, is that the way I, heard what he said?
No, I'm going to jump in on Bobby. I'm not ready to get you on that motion yet.
Oh, no, I'm not making that. I'm just asking, if that is what we do, is it that easy?
Yes. When you get to the point of whether you want to decide whether to ask for qualifications or proposals or to expand the services of the company we have under contract for the project at a different aspect, then a motion would be made at that time.
Okay.
But great question. That's the way it works. That's what the Public Building Authority is all about, to help us through those phases that we're in. But we need to get to that point. I don't know that we're there yet.
Okay.
But thank you. So Jim, does that kind of help you out a little bit? At some point in the next, for some reason, we've got other things going on around us in government, and we haven't picked a date in which to kind of bring the commissioners on board, let them know, because none of them have really seen this kind of time frame, cost, what's really going on. And we need to have that educational component piece delivered to them so they can get comfortable with it. But that'll be done, I hope, in the next 90 days to 100 days. Hopefully, COVID-19 will be behind us, maybe COVID-20 that's coming down the pike, but life is getting back to a little normal. But I kind of like some of these shows we have. We don't have to drive here and there, and I can see the top of Sandy's head and a little smile, and so it's not been all bad. That answer it, Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Rogers. The other component of this is after reviewing or seeing juvenile services over there, I know they're anxious and they're working under some tough conditions over there. So speed to market might be something that we need to think about as well when we consider how we move forward with this. So
I appreciate that. I'll be honest, I have a lot of questions. This is the first I've seen of the implementation plan. I can maybe give you guys a call later, but I have quite a few questions about how this would work.
And Zany, we do too at this point. So there are a lot of other factors that come into play as to when those actually take place. And that implementation schedule that you're looking at, I believe, is going to be modified several times as we move down the road. So I will, or Gresham will be happy to talk to you about that in detail if you like.
Yeah, this is Brown. We're going to need to probably wrap this up. It's almost 11 o'clock, but the information that we got yesterday and today is like drinking out of a fire hose. So it's a lot of information that's coming really fast. So I would hope that the Public Building Authority members, if and when they have questions and comments, that they can email, phone call, that kind of stuff, and get some of those questions answered as we move forward. This is the first time we've seen this document, and it is going to be a living document where it changes and updated and all that kind of stuff. So as we move forward, we'll keep banging away on it. Is there anything else we need to discuss before we hit the top of the hour?
Brown, can I add one thing to what you just said?
Absolutely.
If it makes it easier and more simple for everyone, you could use us as a clearinghouse for those comments and questions, and then we can direct those to the appropriate place. If it's easier for you to do that, welcome to reach out to Grisham directly if you like. But if it's easier just to funnel that through us, we're okay with that if you like.
Great, thank you. Steve, do you have anything else for us?
My only other comment, kind of the next steps, is to get the questions that we're talking about, get the feedback from this presentation. Then we will publish a formal report in the next few weeks that we know there will be ongoing, pretty intensive work on the implementation strategy. And we know there will be a presentation prepared in the next month or two for the county commission to be informed in as much detail as they care to know about it. So that's all for us, and thank you everyone for your attention. And we do know it is a lot of material, and we've tried to distill it down to the key facts, because the final report will be hundreds of pages, but this presentation represents the key facts for all components in the major areas of our work. So thank you all.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Just one last comment. Eric asked that question earlier. I just want to get back to him. The number of juvenile services personnel is increasing from their 60 to 129.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Curtis, for that follow-up.
Okay, if there's not any other business before the meeting, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Brown.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.